podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle Evans, and today we've got another awesome guest with us, Mark Pillar. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kyle. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let me give a little bit of a background on you, Mark, and then we'll have you kind of fill in for us. But Mark came to the U.S. as a refugee from the former Soviet Union in the early 90s and has worked in a large variety of organizations, from large companies to startups, and then eventually launched Backendless in 2012, which we'll dive into a little bit more. I'm excited to talk about that, which he has bootstrapped and grown since then. So, Mark, that's a brief introduction. Why don't you tell us more about yourself and your background?
Thank you. So, yes, Backendless is my third company, second that is successful. First was a complete flop, and I came down here to the United States in the early '90s, right after USSR broke down. I used to live in a place that is now a country in the southern tip of former USSR that is called Uzbekistan. And came down here. I was in the third year of university studying computer science. And when we came down here, my parents pushed me, to go and finish my degree. And of course, education is everything, which is what I tell my kids as well. And at that time, which I think I got really lucky, because in the early '90s, there was this boom going on with computer programmers, and anyone who literally knew how to turn on a computer could get a job. It was, it was fantastic time. So for a 19-year-old, I put together a resume that was about 5 pages long, that just had everything I heard of. And I was lucky to get a job, my very first job, about maybe 4 months into it after coming to the country. And speaking about, coming to the country, I was just super excited about everything that I saw. I was just like, this is an amazing place, And of course, prior to that, you read and hear about the land of opportunity and America and everything that it has to offer. And I was just like absolutely stunned by what is possible here. So I worked initially for about maybe 7 or 8 years, various companies, small and large, just kind of getting the necessary experience and seeing how things done. But I always thought that, I'm going to have my own business one day. Like, I want to work for myself. So I tried. There were a couple of unsuccessful tries, and I started. One point I had my own company. It didn't go anywhere. But then, at some point, I said, I'm going to work a few hours every single day on something cool. And it was actually my New Year's resolution. And I started working on a project, and 6 months later, I had a product that I built, and now I needed to learn how to productize it. Build a website, give it a name, write documentation, describe from the marketing standpoint what it does. So I launched it, and that was my first successful business, which later on pivoted into what Backendless is now.
That's a super, super fascinating background, especially, the starting, some of the failures that kind of go along with it, and, kind of the ability to bring something from, just kind of the side hustle, I guess, the early side hustle from so long ago that, is kind of a continued theme from, or an ongoing theme even today. So, I kind of want to dive into a little bit more of those things, but I guess before we do, outside of a lot of the work that you're doing, what other things do you enjoy doing?
I love travel. Travel to me is, it means a lot. I've been to a lot of different countries, a lot of places. Before COVID hit, American Airlines sends you an annual report, and right before COVID, I actually traveled the globe around, I guess, with miles, I think 5 times over, which is a lot of flying.
Yeah.
So but with the business, it took me to some very far and remote places that I could never imagine. So travel is fantastic. I love cooking. just coming up with various things, and just going to various ethnic stores and just seeing some weird foods and kind of Googling what I can do with them. So that's also a passion of mine. And I think those are going to be the top things. Of course, spending time with kids and playing ball and just doing basic things. It's also fascinating, and I love it just because the opportunity to do that is so short because they grow so
fast. that's the truth. It goes by so quickly.
Right.
Yeah, we've got a couple young kids, and it amazes me how quickly that goes by, as I'm sure you can attest. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you've kind of touched on your background and, coming over as, coming to the United States as a refugee from Uzbekistan, the former part of the USSR, and, kind of what that was like. I'm curious, as so much of it is in the news, and I know, with Russia right now and Ukraine, like, Uzbekistan is obviously, a little bit removed from Ukraine, but obviously, like, being part of the former USSR as well. Like,
Sure.
What are your thoughts just on all of that right now, like watching some of that unfold?
Well, the thing is, I'm so close to kind of seeing the conflict with through the eyes of people who work for Backendless. The large portion of Backendless, pretty much the entire technical team, is from Ukraine.
Yep.
So with everything going on, with all the conversations that I'm a part of, people share with me their experiences and all the regrouping we had to do when the war started, because we have our team is there.
Yep.
And the rockets are flying and buildings are being destroyed. It was very hectic time where we actually had to adapt. But I believe what's going on is completely unjust, just absolutely terrible and unthinkable that we are in the 21st century witnessing atrocities as they're happening now with Russia invading Ukraine and conducting this terrible war. So I just cannot fathom, and I'm in complete disgust with leadership of Russia, and not just leadership. I believe people of Russia supporting the war and just being oblivious to what's going on says a lot. And I'm just absolutely disgusted with, to be honest, with the whole country.
Yep.
Because I just cannot imagine that, in the modern times, someone could take this attitude and just be so brainwashed and afraid to speak up that, governments can actually do such things.
Yeah, it's a super, such a difficult thing. And I'm interested too in your teams, because I had a very similar experience where, part of our development team was based in Ukraine, like as, right as it was happening, as Russia first invaded. And then, I actually ended up moving to a different role in a different company shortly thereafter, and ended up, unfortunately, because of that, and just the war and the communication and things, losing touch with some of those people who I was working so closely with for so long. And it's kind of gut wrenching, that part of it. But how have you been able to maintain contact with some of those team members, and how has it impacted them? And I'm kind of interested in that aspect.
So when it just started, we said, look, people come first, business is secondary. We need to make sure that everyone is safe. And we basically said, guys, take as much time as you need to relocate, get your families in the places where you believe it's going to be safer. And once you are somewhere where you can actually, start thinking about, doing some work, or using work as a distraction from everything that is happening, we'll regroup and we'll just continue to do things to the best of our abilities. So basically giving some time off where people can make the decisions that would be important for them to, move things, because it's a fairly young crowd,
Yeah.
young professionals. A lot of people who came to Backendless were just straight out of universities, so they've been with us for quite some time. So of course, there are young families with kids and their parents and grandparents. Everyone gets involved. So that was challenging. And then plus, if you think about at the scale of the whole country, which is about 45 million people, a large group of people is essentially just moving towards the West, where it's safer. And with that, there are problems where it's hard to find an apartment, and they're running out of gas, and there are lines, huge lines, just to get gas. And with all of that, it becomes complicated. But at some point, everyone ended up where they felt safer, and it was hard because the information space is filled with so much news. It's coming from everywhere, and Russia is trying to play their propaganda where, they're sending in pieces of, some news information just to kind of cause some kind of civil unrest and whatnot. And it's hard to just, kind of filter signal from noise. And at one point, there was an article circulated somewhere in Ukraine in the IT sphere that basically said, guys, we people in IT in Ukraine, we are kind of in a special group because no matter what the consequences are, the economy is in ruins. If we continue doing our work, that will ensure that some funds are coming into the country to support our economy. So the best way that we can help this war is to actually just do the work and make sure that we're helping our customers. That in turn will help our economy. So that article got circulated. We surfaced it in our chat groups internally, and that made a difference. People were like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let's just go back to work. And ever since, it's stabilized. But at the same time, I'm just in absolute awe that people managed to do it. They managed to do the work. I don't see a whole lot of difference before the war and now, because they're just fully committed.
Yeah.
And that is heroic, because we could be on a conference call discussing some business, and there is an air siren that some rockets are flying, and they're like, okay, let's just finish the conversation. I'll go into the bunker later on. And then to contrast that, here in Texas, we could have a cold front come in, right? When temperatures drop, everything's freezing, and people like, nope, cannot do any work. It is, it's freezing out there.
Yep. It's we've got just a little bit of frost, and that's enough that we can't go anywhere, and it might knock out the power.
Stay at home. We cannot do any work.
Yep.
And to contrast that, people have, just committing their code and look out of the window and there are tanks rolling by.
It's
not a problem.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. That's, it's good to hear, but it's also devastating to hear. And it's amazing. Total, we've been saying it for a little while, but yeah, it's just amazing what they're going through over there. And it's amazing to hear that, they're still able to be doing that. And absolutely some of the most talented teams that I've worked with. I wish that I was still working with some of those people that on some of the teams that I was working with before, because just absolutely just amazing people.
I agree with you. It is really amazing, because I've tried outsourcing early on, and that outsourcing was not from Ukraine. And by the way, now we don't do outsourcing. These are our people we hire direct. They're part of Backendless. But I think there's a cultural difference that actually makes them better engineers, in a way where to be a good engineer, you've got to have critical thinking. No matter whether you are in the quality assurance testing things, or writing software, or if you are a UX designer, you got to be able to critique things and think critically and ask questions, and not be afraid to ask questions. Why? Why does it need to be this way? Can it be simpler? Why do we have to do it like this? Can we, simplify it for the users? And whenever you're working in a creative environment, being able to ask those questions or just having an environment where those questions are welcome leads to or results in just better products.
Yeah.
And my experience, maybe it was just my subjective experience of specific companies, and I tried several of them. It was like you give an assignment and they just do it like it's written. No questions asked. Just assuming that that's the marching order. And that just didn't work for me.
Yep.
But in Ukraine, and we tried, different companies first, but then we started hiring direct. That was kind of always the same thing. People think through problems and they will ask questions. They will provide more creative solutions, which is fantastic.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, no, that's been exactly my same experience, and with a number of the developers that I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with from Ukraine as well. Just absolute stellar people. So, hey, and hopefully if you're listening to this over there, I don't know how, but you guys are absolutely awesome. So, switching gears just a little bit, you've brought up, and we've talked about Backendless a couple of times now. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What is Backendless, and well, let's start there, and we'll dive into a little bit more about the thinking behind what it is.
Sure. So let's start with the highest level possible. It is a platform that makes it simpler for you to turn your ideas into applications, whether they are mobile or desktop. If you're thinking about a problem and you can visualize the user experience, what the users will see on the screen and how they will transform through the screens to execute business functions. And you may not be able to visualize it. There are people who can capture it and create mock-up storyboards, whatnot. But in the essence, it is a system to turn ideas into reality. We call it Visual Application Development Platform. And let's use that as a segue to kind of dig a little deeper. So what does Visual Application Development Platform entail? It means that in order to build an application within Backendless, whether it is mobile or desktop application, you can do the whole thing graphically. You do not need to get down to the level of writing actual code. If you're good with code, you absolutely can do that within Backendless. So it is a platform that appeals to both coders and no coders. So if you are a no coder, because this is kind of becoming a thing of modern days, is doing things without code. So if you are a no coder, the promise is that you don't need to know a programming language is definitely there. However, there are certain things you need to know. One, you need to understand how the platform works. So there is a learning curve. We provide training videos, there's documentation, so it will require you to kind of understand how it works. What would make it a better, we'll get to that later. So as far as the actual platform, it consists of two primary parts. One is the backend. For those who don't understand what backend is, when you launch pretty much any application on your mobile phone, what you see is the front end. This is what captures the user experience. All the individual screens, starting from the login or registration to, if it is a banking app, the screen that lists all your accounts or all your transactions. That's the front end. There is another part which is just as significant that users do not see, and that is called backend. Now, backend is going to be running somewhere on some servers. It could be the cloud, it could be dedicated servers. Let's just say servers. And backend is responsible for really a finite set of things, such as handling information about your identity, like what's your user ID and password, and verifying that whenever you're trying to log in, that you are indeed who you say you are. So that happens on the server. Storing data in the database, like whenever you log into your mobile banking application, and it retrieves information about your accounts and transactions, that's coming from some database. And the backend is the one that provides this data. And I could go on and on and on, like for instance, sending out an email, or sending out a push notification, or uploading an image in your social media, those images are stored somewhere in the backend. So we have the front end and the back end. And the front end and the back end need to communicate with each other. There's going to be this integration, meaning that when you click certain button, request goes to the server does something, returns a response, and then the front end shows. With Backendless, we cover both front end and the back end. So on the back end, if you need to design your database, you can do it visually. If you need to manage your users, you can do it visually. If you need to work with the files that are accumulated by the application, once again, you can do it visually. Same thing goes for the front end. If you need to design that screen, lay out individual components, and you say, okay, this is going to be like certain text, and there's going to be a list of products, and there's going to be a button to add something to the shopping cart, whatnot. You lay it out visually. The most important part now, with any application, there is going to be logic. And the logic is basically the smarts that make the application alive. Like, what should happen when I click a button? There's going to be some, check if you do this and that, and if the file is available, or if the data is in the database, then, run a transaction. So all of that logic needs to be described somehow. And that's where typically and historically code would come in. Like with the code, you would describe the logic. With Backendless, you can do it with code, but you can also do it without code using the visual programming paradigm that we call codeless. And codeless works like really a collection of the jigsaw puzzles that you can snap together to build the actual logic. And once you snap them together and you have that logic, we actually generate code that will run and execute that logic. Okay, so now fairly low level of creating front end, creating back end, and how it is automatically integrated together. Once you're done, you just click publish. It packages the app, and you can run that app in a browser out of the box. Right there, you get a link, or you can package it to run on the mobile device and publish it to the App Store. So, and that becomes the complete cycle of building an app and running it.
Awesome. So there's several things to kind of unpack there, and I'm really, really curious. How do you see this changing how we develop applications going forward? So obviously, like you mentioned before, the no code movement is obviously becoming more and more prevalent and a bigger part of what we're doing. So how is it changing how we create applications, and how do you see that continuing to change how we develop applications going forward?
Sure. There is a common sort of understanding, or really a message from the no-code community, that no-code democratizes application development, which is true to an extent. There is a little bit of an over-promise saying that you don't need to know programming language to build apps. True, there are visual ways to do this, and we provide one of them. What the message doesn't say, and what vendors prefer not to say, is that in order to build apps, it is okay not to know programming language, but you gotta have some basic skills from computer science that you really need to understand in order to be better or good at it. For instance, the basic idea of, they call it assignment of responsibilities. Okay, so assignment of responsibilities is when you design a system, and the system consists of multiple components. It's basically splitting up this problem into smaller problems and saying which individual component, either visual or business component running on the server, is responsible for. And you basically say, whenever I need to save data to the database, I go to that service. Or whenever I need to calculate something, I go to that API. And being able to split this up in a way that, makes the system kind of, come alive and everything can talk to each other is a skill. It comes with an experience. You really need to understand how to dissect this. In addition to that, and it's related to this, the problem of building systems and applications comes down to taking the general problems, like I need to build this app, and start dissecting it into smaller problems, and taking those smaller problems and splitting them up into even smaller problems. And that is also a skill because, we, ever since we opened up our system and said, look, we are a no code development platform, we see people coming in that are struggling with understanding how to split this up. They tend to look at things in a very monolithic way, and it becomes scary because it's like a black box that I just don't even know from what side to attack. And then even down lower, like, just the basic computer science stuff of, understanding what loops are and what variables are and how to do value assignment and what the data types are. Those are important things to know when you build applications. And that is one of the biggest challenges in the no-code community, is that people jump in on the promise that I don't need to know programming language to do it, and they start struggling to build applications that work. Here's another thing. In order for to launch an application, it is not enough just to build it and say, okay, these are my screens, everything's working. If your application is to become successful, it means it needs to be able to deal with either very large set of users, like a lot of people downloading, there is a high traffic, and or large data set. Like, for instance, you are accumulating a lot of data. You have, your database has millions of records. If you did not design to scale, it means that at some point, application will become sluggish and users will not be happy about it. So you will be getting a lot of 1-star reviews in the App Store and a lot of complaints on the support forum, and people will be saying, look, what's going on? So scaling is something that should not be taken lightly. Specifically with Backendless, scaling is something that is embedded into our architecture. For the reason that when we started, one of the kind of guiding principles that I established for our team was to say that scaling should be just an attribute, a quality of our system, not something that needs to be achieved later on once an app is built. And that is something that we care deeply about. And what that means is that when you build an application with Backendless, and if you follow best practices, on day one, whether you have one user using your app or millions of users, the performance is going to be the same. There will not be degradation of performance because the platform is built to scale. That is not so much true with some other systems out there that are done in a way where it's very easy to build UIs, but they just don't do a lot or really anything to make sure that those apps scale. And then they don't really do a whole lot to train their users with an idea of what it makes an application scalable. As a result, when you look at how those systems are built and you have, let's say, database, you could have a database with like 200 different columns. And just to give you an idea, if you look at a spreadsheet, right? Imagine there are 200 different columns in that Google sheet. It becomes completely very hard to use. And the same thing with an application. When you're retrieving data from a table that has 200 different columns, it's going to be very sluggish. But people don't know that this is a bad practice. You should not be doing it.
Yeah.
And nobody tells
them. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you brought up a couple things that I kind of want to dive into a little bit, because I think you touched on some really important points, like on the actual design and structure of building an app, and then the learning that goes along with it. So, to some of the points that you made, how much of the overall architecture or design should be on the person creating the app, and how much of that should be on the system? Because obviously, the system that you're creating with can handle a lot of different scenarios, but how much of that should go back to the user? And then going along those same lines, like how should someone go about learning some of the best ways to do this? Even though it is no code by its very nature, there is some amount of understanding that you should have. So how should users go about gaining that understanding and really being able to do it so that they're creating the right architecture and frameworks in order to make it the most successful?
Right, exactly. Great question. So I think the responsibility is on both sides in order to do it right. Let's just step aside from building applications and let's look at the no code approach with like construction. You go to Home Depot, and with everything that they sell, you could literally build a house by yourself, right?
Yep.
You get everything, starting from, concrete all the way to roofing with plumbing and, all the 2x4s and, everything. And let's say you want to apply the no-code approach with plumbing. Like you don't want to call a plumber, you want to do it yourself. You just go in there, you got to get all the PVCs and you get that glue and you get whatever you need to. If you haven't watched a single YouTube video on plumbing or read, will your do-it-yourself plumbing system work? I'd say unlikely. Something's going to be leaking.
Yep.
And I speak from the experience. And I think it is fairly universal, right?
Yep.
You got to know what you're doing if you're doing it yourself, right? I think it's fairly accurate to say even with code, right? So you get that system, that all those building blocks that you can, snap together and, fill out those forms that describe what you're doing. But if you don't truly understand what happens with that data, how is it going to be stored? How is it going to be retrieved? How is it going to be transformed to display in the UI? The odds are you're going to run into the problem where things will not work exactly as you expect. Either they will not work right away, or they will not work when you have 10,000 users registered to your system, and there is some traffic that is being generated by all of the users of your app. So who bears the responsibility to make it right? I believe that responsibility is assigned to both vendor and the user. So the user really needs to understand what they're doing and what the consequences are for the decisions that they're making. Okay. But the vendor would need to either put some controls into the platform itself to say, hey, what you just did does not look right, or that's going to cause problems, and then provide a warning and just strictly, restrict them from doing that. Or they need to provide more educational materials to inform users of what the best ways of accomplishing certain tasks are.
Yeah.
Because in computer science, they wouldn't be calling it science if it was just a matter of filling out forms online. It is a science.
Yeah.
And if you are no coder, that's not an excuse that you don't need to train yourself on some basics of computer science. I'm convinced with that.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think that makes perfect sense. And how should somebody who is, maybe coming into it like pretty new, how should they start learning about it, about the basics of computer science? Like where are the best places to learn, the very low level things? If I was, if I had no computer science background or no coding background, like obviously it may not be, starting to learn a language, but really to learn the concepts. How would you go about that?
Great question. There are actually plenty of resources. If you like Udemy, if you registered and took any courses there, Udemy has a bunch of resources. Some of them may look overwhelming because the ones that are like 5 stars, you look at them and there's going to be like 150 hours of materials, about 100 plus lessons. I look at it like, okay, well, I don't have time. It looks fantastic, but I just don't have time to do it. So you got to really identify the areas that you need to improve. In my learning path, it kind of was at the time when YouTube was not around, and books were the only source of kind of getting information. So as far as books, one of the best books that I have read on just design and architecture, of course, there is the Gang of Four book on the design patterns, which is great. Another book that I really, really liked, it is by Craig Larman. It is called Applying UML and Patterns. Okay. And Craig and I, we used to work at the same company here in Dallas called Object Space. And a lot of things that he talks about were kind of adopted there, even at the interview process at Object Space, which was fantastic. So some of the design principles of how to dissect problems into smaller problems and applying patterns are described in those books. But If you just go and start searching YouTube or even Udemy on design patterns and designing systems, which is separated from code. It really talks about design. To continue the construction analogy, it's not going to talk about whether you use nail number 5 here and nail number 2 there, and the kind of different 2x4s or 2x8s, whatever. It talks about just how you conceptually approach a problem of compartmentalizing decisions and things that the system is responsible for. So for no coders, understanding the principles of system design is more important than understanding the principles at a lower level.
Yep.
However, if you are curious about lower level, specifically, let's say with Codeless, with Backendless, if you go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Backendless, one of the courses that we have there is called Codeless Fundamentals. And Codeless Fundamentals talks about, it's about, I think, 20 lectures, 24 videos. We talk about everything that you could do with codeless paradigm of how to use those building blocks to create logic, and that will generate code for you. So that's for anyone who is interested in Backendless. I believe it is a must to go through that training course, and then a lot of different things become more obvious from there.
Yep. No, that's great. Well, we'll definitely put the link in the show notes as well to some of the references and to the YouTube channel to check that out, because I think that's a super, super valuable thing. Wherever you're at in your understanding, being able to do more, I always think is incredibly, incredibly helpful. And just experimenting more and more, whether you've done a little or have done a lot, like just taking it to the next level is, I don't know, just do the next level, whatever that is, like take it to the next step. So, and I'm curious. So, I've been listening, we in some of my work, we work with machine learning and artificial intelligence. And there's always this kind of notion that some of these things are going to start to replace people in what comes next. And I don't know if there's necessarily that sentiment, but I could see that sentiment in, some of the no code potentially, that it starts to replace developers. Do you see that being the case?
Absolutely. I think so. So the whole promise of democratizing app development, it is true to an extent where some of the simpler tasks will be handled by machines, and people who can handle the level of complexity that is provided by those apps. If you look at what Wix has done with being able to generate websites simply by providing a questionnaire to the user who starts with it, and for those who haven't tried with Wix, if you need like a basic marketing site for your shop, for your service, whatever, when you log into Wix, it asks you a couple of questions: what's your business name, where you're located, what's your tagline, business name, and so on. And it literally generates a website based on a template that you selected. And you can customize the whole thing. So what that means that for those companies whose bread and butter was creating these type of websites, I think just air completely sucked out of their own. Because you could do what they used to do in a matter of a couple of weeks within 5 minutes, and you have a working website, which is fantastic. I believe that analogy can be extended to many other things that exist in the app development space. Creating, like for instance, with Backendless, whenever you create an application, you get the templates of various different apps that just provide functionality out of the box. Let's say if you want a chat app, we have a template that you create an app from, and you have full-blown working chat that you can customize, change the styling and theme, and have chat for your system. So what that means is that the types of problems that developers who are hardcore developers working with code, they will start focusing on more specialized, more complex things. And right now they are, as you said, machine learning, AI, some of the problems that are being solved where there is a heavier, more involved algorithmic processing and just the thinking that needs to go in there.
Yeah.
And then a lot of other things will be handled just by programs and users, business users working with those programs.
Yep.
It is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And then as we progress and the other new things come out, whether it's virtual reality or whatever, or programming appliances and devices around us, then similar thing will be happening because, who knows, maybe a toaster will have its own app store where you can just, get apps for it to enhance it with capabilities and whatnot. And those could actually be created by no coders too. So that will not require a lot of skills.
Yep.
An area that I think is fairly safe for app developers is gaming, because I don't think it's possible that you can create Tetris-like games with no code. Definitely possible.
Yeah.
But with the progression that is happening in game development these days, they are becoming more realistic, more involved, more the type of experiences that really mimic the real life. I don't think the no code will ever be at that level where anyone can create that type of game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's fascinating to me that as we continue to progress, I think that seeing a lot of the automation, kind of like you were talking about, on a lot of the more routine things and a lot of the, I don't know, you can almost call it like some of the lower level or simpler things, and then allowing for a lot more focus on a lot of the more sophisticated tasks, which obviously causes some shifts in what people are focused on, but also allows for a lot more innovation happening. Like as developers and people can focus less on creating, kind of like you're saying, like marketing websites. Like our development efforts aren't happening there; they're happening on AI and machine learning and virtual reality. Like that's a cool shift in my mind anyway. Like we're not doing these simple things. Like our developers and people aren't focused on that. And certainly there's transition as people start to move further down that innovation line, but it's an exciting time, and
it is absolutely exciting time. However, it is an exciting time for developers who really excel at what they're doing. What it also means is that for the group of developers in there, and that group is fairly large, that are mediocre, they're just like, learn certain thing and they know how to do it, more than likely that layer is going to be pretty much eliminated as time goes by.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. So with that, I'll ask, what is your advice to developers or people looking to get into either no code or into development? Like if somebody was looking to get into it right now, or looking to skill up or something like that, like what advice would you give to that group of people?
For developers, I think there is going to be a tremendous opportunity, and I'm talking about developers who are who work with code. There's going to be a tremendous opportunity with the variety of no-code tools as they are, maturing now to contribute to their marketplaces, because it is fairly obvious at this point that the no-code will continue to grow, and the number of people who get plugged in to build with no-code is going to be growing, maybe even exponentially, because those tools will get better and better. So there is going to be a tremendous opportunity, because you will have a very large market of people who need more or less custom things. And those customizations, either they are components or custom pages or plugins or whatnot, they will be available through marketplaces. Okay? So for developers who are looking for the next opportunity, jumping into development to create those custom components, pages, maybe blueprint applications, and start, getting them done, publishing to those marketplaces, especially if those marketplaces provide a way to publish it for a fee, that will result in could result in some substantial residual income that will be coming over many years to come. So this is an advice for those who feel opportunistic. Okay, if you are not that kind and just want to work on cool stuff, then start getting into those newer technologies that are considered cool today that will become mainstream tomorrow.
Yep.
And again, it is VR, AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, all that stuff.
Okay.
And if neither of those groups, start retraining for whatever you think is cool. That you can apply your skills.
Yep.
Because your days are going to be numbered as a developer.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right, Mark, this has been a great conversation. I guess before I kind of ask final couple of questions, any final thoughts on anything we talked about?
Final thoughts. I'll just do a quick plug for Backendless. So if you guys are looking for a way to build an application, and if you're not a coder, don't be afraid. Check it out, backendless.com. We do have a great onboarding system that is called Missions. It is a gamified experience where you'll be provided with a set of tasks with instructions. You execute those tasks, which are basically functions within the platform itself. You'll get badges. You'll get our own currency called Backendless bucks that you can convert to real dollars and buy stuff from our shop or the subscriptions. And by going through those missions, you can actually unlock the free plan that we provide to build your applications. So that's kind of a great way to get started with our platform. We integrate with a variety of other systems. Like, let's say if you are building UIs with other systems, and there's a bunch of them, I will not even mention names because everybody knows them. We integrate with all of them as a backend. So, and then our thing is scalability. So if you are looking for a highly scalable system that can handle huge traffic, it is okay to build UIs elsewhere, but don't disregard the fact that scalability primarily comes from the backend, and that's where we really shine. So I guess that would be my final thoughts to share.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. Backendless.com. We'll put the link in the show notes. And is there anywhere else that people can check out more about you or anything else that you're working on?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. It is, /in/Mark Piller, one word, Mark, Piller. I'm on Twitter, not very active, but you can definitely get a hold of me there. I'm at Codeless Coder.
Okay. Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes as well. And cool. Well, let me wrap up with the final kind of two questions for you.
Sure.
And have you read or watched or listened to anything interesting recently that you'd want to share?
Yeah. I watched a movie just the other day on Netflix. It is by Coen brothers, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic the way it was done. It was a ballad of, it's like a Western type of movie. It consists of, multiple small, you know what I'm talking about?
Is it the ballad of Buster Scruggs?
Scruggs.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It was great. And as far as the book, let me log into my Audible account. Yep. It is a great book that I read or listened to, that I highly recommend to those that like kind of science fiction type of books. It is called, I'm scrolling to it right now, guys, sorry about that. By the way, Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey is great.
It looks really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen to it because on Audible, Matt McConaughey is the one who narrates his own book, and he adds so much color with the way he talks, and so it's awesome.
Yep.
Called Dark Matter by Blake Crouch.
I'll give a +1 to that too. That is such a good book. Yes, I absolutely love it. Blake Crouch. He has another one too. Oh, what is it? I'm just looking back at my bookshelf and I don't see it. He has another book too. And I'm forgetting the name of it, but yeah,
Similar genre?
yes, similar genre, but yeah, his two, oh, it's called Recursion. Those two books I read last summer. Just absolutely so good. So good. Yeah, I'd highly recommend both of those.
Yeah, they're great.
Yep.
And it's the kind of book that I love, the kind of books when you read and it just like, it plays like a movie.
Yep.
And Dark Matter is definitely one of those.
Yeah, totally. Oh man, such a good book. I'm glad you read it and enjoyed it, because that's one I loved as well. Yeah.
Sweet.
Cool. All right. And I guess last question, we do a kind of a shout out and gripe, anything that, any products that you've used and liked or hated recently.
A product that I used is called Bravo Studio, which is absolutely awesome. Bravo Studio can take your designs in Figma and with just some annotations, turn it into a live, real app that runs on a mobile device.
Wow.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And they actually integrate with us as well. So you can have your backend and Backendless and designs in Figma. And they did a test where they put together designs for an Instagram clone. And, the backend was in Backendless. Just click generate and you get full-blown Instagram clone right from the designs. Magic.
Wow.
Bravo Studio.
Yeah. Bravo Studio. Okay. That sounds really cool to design it in Figma and then just have it now. I'll have to check all that out. Well, we've got a lot of cool stuff through this episode. So hopefully some really cool things for everybody to check out, because you could do a lot of cool things just with like some of the recommendations here. Okay. Cool. Well, Mark, it has been a really great conversation and a pleasure talking to you. Hopefully I've taken a lot away from this conversation. Hopefully everybody else has as well. And I'm excited to try out some of the things that you suggested through the whole episode and here at the end and give it a try. So really appreciate it. We'll put all of the links in the show notes so others can try Backendless and try out some of these things as well. Because I think that it is going to be incredibly valuable for a lot of people out there. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kyle.
All right. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll talk again soon. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at prod_by_design. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well, or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.